Okay. So our speaker today is Cindy Lowry, who is president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham, which is the local chapter. And we've invited her here today because one of this Zonta Club's goals for the year is to get better at collaborating with other organizations that share a lot of our goals so that we can be more effective in our advocacy and hopefully accomplish some of these goals. And I wanted to give just a quick history because some of you may not know that. Zonta and the League of Women Voters on a national level have been working together to improve the lives of women and girls for a century. They both have consultative status at the United Nations and have worked together on trying to be sure that UN resolutions and agencies include women as full equal partners in the world and in all rights declarations. We've not quite gotten there yet, but we're still working on it. Then locally, we have worked with the League for a number of years, mostly with coalitions of other folks working for the same goals. So we both belong to Cover Alabama, working for Medicaid expansion. And a few years ago, we did a lot of things together. Excuse me, should have taken this off. We did a lot of things together through ARLA, working on payday lending. Cindy Lowry is particularly appropriate for us to have speak today because not only is she president of the Greater Birmingham League of Women Voters, but her day job is as executive director of the Alabama Rivers Alliance. And when she won an award for sustainability work at Auburn a few years ago, they referred to her as a network weaver. And that's what we're looking to do, is to expand our network so that we can work together more effectively. Cindy has a very impressive bio, which most of you have already seen. But we are so delighted to have her here. The NAACP, in giving her an award, gave her the Wonderful Outstanding Woman Award. and those of us who work very hard not to make distinctions between men and women in terms of our work might have a little bit of a problem with the fact that it was just a woman rather than just Wonderful Outstanding Person Award. But we are so pleased to have her here today. Thanks, Cindy.
All right, I'm going to try to sit. If I'm not loud enough, y'all tell me, then I'll stand up and project better. I want to be close to this microphone here too, so the Zoom folks can hear. And I have not perfected the art of reading and using reading glasses and then looking up at you, so y'all bear with me on that as well. But thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And actually, I looked up Zonta on the internet because I am not really familiar with your organization. And one of the things that has been almost a little overwhelming about the league, getting involved in the League of Women Voters, is how old the organization is. You know, over 100 years old, and you guys are the same. So you know the way it feels to come into an organization that is has so much history and so much amazing work and people that have been a part of it for so many years, but also a lot to learn, a lot of protocols, a lot of issues. And so I'm not going to profess to know everything about the league because I've only been with the league for a few years, or really engaged in the league for a few years. But I'm learning more every day, and I'm going to share what I know, and hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions, or maybe Mary Lynn can help with some of them. But I really love the title of this talk, which we kind of came up with quickly to do the promotion. But the title is The Importance of Participating in Democracy. And nothing excites me more than encouraging and empowering people to participate in democracy. It's really been a lifelong passion of mine to do this. So allow me just to nerd out for a minute on democracy. So and Merriam-Webster defines democracy as government by the people. Pretty simple definition. Too often, though, when I talk to people, especially young people these days, they're very cynical about feeling like our government is by the people, and that they have a voice in government. And that makes me really sad. But when I look at Merriam-Webster's definition, there's more folks coming on. A little more elaborate definition they have is a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. The word exercised really stood out to me in that. I have a love-hate relationship with exercise, as probably most of us do, but I know that exercise means you have to get off the couch and do something. So that's really where I come to the empowerment and encouragement to participate in democracy. It doesn't work without us. It doesn't work without people getting off the couch and doing something. So when I was in high school, I got my first taste of exercising my participation in democracy when I got to be a page in the Alabama Senate, or I can't remember if it was House of Representatives, I think. Now, this could have turned me off for life, I'll admit, because it was my first dose of how dysfunctional the Alabama legislature can be. But this was many years ago, and this was probably maybe not quite as dysfunctional as it is now, but it didn't turn me off. It really lit a fire in me. And I think that was because my government teacher at the time in high school was showing me the importance of democracy and of the government by the people. And so shout out to all the teachers in the room and on Zoom, if there are any, because you do make a difference in people's lives. And this really was the turning point for me to want to stay involved in civic engagement for my whole life. Now, as I've gotten older and I put this passion to work in my career at the Alabama Rivers Alliance and in my volunteer work with League of Women Voters and other organizations, I have come to realize that every child did not have the same experience growing up that I did. Let's just say that old saying that says, don't talk about religion and politics at the dinner table, did not apply to my family. That's all we talked about. Maybe sprinkle a little college football in there too, because we are in Alabama. But so I really did get it from my family. I got inspired by lots of people growing up, and that brings us to today. And I'm very excited to share with you about the amazing organization that the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham is. And as I said, I don't know if I said this to Mary Lynn, this is my first presentation to give as president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham about the League. So it's exciting to get my start. I just became the president in June. So we're just kind of doing all that transition stuff and orientation and planning for the year. But I wanted to start with the big picture of the League for those of you that may not know. And as Mary Lynn mentioned, it started in 1920. The League is a three-tiered organization, probably like you guys are. We have the U.S. League, the Alabama state, and then all the local chapters across the state. And I just took some information I thought was really powerful off the League of the National League website. The League was officially founded in Chicago in 1920, just 6 months before the 19th Amendment was ratified, and women won the vote. Formed by the suffragists of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. The League began as a mighty political experiment. I love that. Designed to help 20 million women carry out their new responsibility as voters. And I love that too, because voting is such a responsibility. It's not something that we take lightly. I also thought that it was very important to read this part of the website where they talk about the history and some of the challenges in the history. The path to women's suffrage was complicated and sometimes ugly. History books tend mostly to credit the courage and tenacity of white women. It is past time to amend the history books and tell the real story of the suffrage movement. It is past time we all celebrate the women of color who were at the center of the movement alongside their white counterparts. And it is past time for our country to acknowledge that when the 19th Amendment was ratified, many women still weren't able to cast a ballot because of Jim Crow laws that denied them full enfranchisement. So both the State League in Alabama and our local chapters, what's next? So I wanted to read that part because I do think that we're all grappling with acknowledging that and making sure that is part of our narrative of our history. And not only is it that everyone didn't get the right to vote when women did, white women did, but we're still struggling with a lot of challenges in voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression in our state and others in particular. So I'll talk a little more about how the League is working on that, but I think it's just important to start with that. So as you guys know, probably from your work as well, both the state league in Alabama and the local chapters are all volunteer organizations. And it's a very different, I work for a staffed environmental organization. So our board can just say, hey, Cindy, do this, or hey, so-and-so, update our website, change the emails over when it's time and things like that. And it's a lot more work as an all volunteer group. It really is everybody pitching in and doing the work. And in our local league, we look to the state and the national to kind of share the protocols and the rules that we operate under, the structure and guidelines. But we do focus on issues and activities that are important to the greater Birmingham area. So we are looking at local issues and trying to be involved in local activities that affect this area. And I think we're tied as the largest local league with Mobile, if I'm remembering that correctly. So back to participating in democracy. The league works on what I would call two different fronts to provide opportunities and protect our rights to participate in democracy. And one of those is, of course, voting, and I'll talk more about how we do that. And the other is civic engagement with government around issues of concern. So we work on the voting end, and we also work on getting involved in our government officials and agencies and how we advocate for issues. So a very important note that I have to insert here is the league is nonpartisan organization. And that's very important because because in our state we have two parties and we have a divided country right now, in particular, evenly divided. And we work, when you're advocating for issues of concern, it's important that you advocate for the issues and you take positions on the issues, which I'll talk about more how we do that. And not what that means to be nonpartisan for us is that we don't support specific candidates and we don't support specific parties or endorse specific parties. And that's an important way for us to maintain our advocacy efforts all across the board. It's about who cares about what we care about. So voting. Some might say it's our most fundamental democratic right and duty as the citizens of this country. And as you all know, it's perhaps not as easy for everyone as it should be in this day and time. So those of us who have access to driver's licenses, internet, a printer, transportation, all just kind of take it for granted that we can just go and vote. But that's not the case for many Alabamians. And there's continued onslaught of different pieces of legislation every year to try to make that harder instead of easier. So that's where the league and all the other partners, Marilyn mentioned coalitions that work on these type issues, come in, is trying to make this more accessible. So our Greater Birmingham League has a very active voter services committee, and that's led by Julie Reed, our vice president of the Greater Birmingham League board right now. She lives in Vestavia. So I'm going to tell you about some of the ways that we help people have access to voting. And also, this is ways that we always need volunteers. So if you're interested. So voter registration is something we do everywhere all the time. We set up events. Whenever a school asks us to come in and do voter registration, we'll set up a table. We have the forms. We have trained volunteers that know how to fill out the forms. And we take those forms and mail them into the state if people need us to, or they can take them and do it themselves. We participate in all kinds of fairs and festivals around with voter registration. And we do things like upcoming September 20th is National Voter Registration Day. And we have a great relationship with all the thrift stores in the Birmingham area. I think it's America's Thrift Stores. And they let us come and set up voter registration there. And so that's also like a targeted place to reach a lot of people who may not have easy access to the internet or to ways to register to vote. So we register hundreds of voters a year, and it's a great service. And we also are participating in coalitions with other organizations that bring it, like the Rivers Alliance, for example. We've started having voter registration at many of our events, and we asked the league to come in and try to and do that for us because we're not trained, obviously. So it's kind of reaching that broad audience. I actually just read, I'll throw in a little environmental stuff here because that's where most of my experience is. I just read an article from the Environmental Voter Project that said that most of the people, according to a study they did, most of the people who put climate change as their number one thing that they care about are not voting. So that was discouraging. They're responding to surveys. So it's probably, I think it was younger generations that are just sort of cynical about it, but also people of low income and low wealth and communities of color that are predominantly the ones impacted by climate change right now, care about climate change, but maybe don't have that access to voting and aren't finding that as easy to do. So it's very important that we get everyone registered to vote. And in Alabama and really in the US, we're, most of the time about 50% of the population votes. I think we got up to 60% during the last presidential election, but that's still not enough. And I do have friends sometimes that say that I'm so tired of hearing we've just got to get better people elected, or we've got to vote and get out the vote. And I'm like, but it's true. You can't determine the issues based on half the people voting. And sometimes in midterm elections and local elections, it might be 25%. I mean, it's so bad. So if we don't vote, we don't participate, and we can't have a say in the decisions that are made. So the other thing that is super cool that I learned about when I got involved in the league was voting rights restoration work. And you do have to be trained for this. It is a very important aspect of the League of Greater Birmingham's work, and I know others in the state. It's restoring the rights of people who have been incarcerated. And so when there have been laws passed recently that better define the types of crimes that kick your voting rights out. And there's not that big of a list. And so many criminals think that or people who have committed a felony think that they're just automatically lose their right to vote, and they don't know any better. And the state is not really doing a lot to help them understand whether or not they lost their right to vote. So our league and some others, I think Greater Birmingham Ministries is very active in the area. They go to the probation offices 2 times a week, I think, at least. And they talk to those getting out on probation, and they work, if they're interested, they work them through this process to learn to look up what their crime was and where it fits into and they help them restore their right to vote, or just let them know they didn't lose it in the first place. And they have had extreme success. Dozens, if not hundreds of folks have gotten signed up. I think probably more like dozens, but a lot this year. And it's the stories they tell about the way people feel when they learn that they can still vote is pretty amazing. And so it is something that matters to people, and especially when you lose it. I mean, it is such a thing we take for granted that when you lose that right, it matters, and you learn how important it is. So that's another way that we train. We would love to have more volunteers for that, and that we train volunteers. The other thing someone was mentioning, I don't always know who to vote for, and it's hard to find information about candidates, and that's true. And what the other thing the league tries to do, both at the state level and that we do at the local level, is it's called Vote 411. So that's a national website, but we have to buy into it and fill in the information. We send questionnaires to candidates running in races. And we decide as the league, based on our issues and our members, what those questions are going to be. And we send them to their candidates running for office. And they choose whether or not to answer the questions. But the Vote 411 website, which is vote411.org or maybe .com, is you fill in your information, you fill in your address and zip code, and it takes you to the races that you have in your area, and you can look at the candidates that have filled out the questionnaire. You can see the ones that don't fill it out. That says something too. But it really does help to provide information about what the candidates are thinking on some of these issues that we've decided that we're important to our members and to us as the league. So it's a great website. It's a great tool. And we, as again, all volunteers, we usually have to determine how many what races we're going to do this for. Also, we do candidate forums, but that's another one. It takes a lot of work. So we won't necessarily always be able to do it for every single local race. Like, I'm not sure we did anything for the Mountain Brook City Council race that just happened, but Usually we try, particularly with this upcoming election, we've sent questionnaires to all of the candidates running for legislature in our area, and some of the more contested races at the local level, like I think there was maybe a sheriff's race in Jefferson County, and so we try to capture those that do have a lot of people running and need more information for the candidates. Unfortunately, we have way too many races in Alabama that don't have more than one person running, except for the Libertarian Party now has remedied that in a lot of ways. So we got to give them credit for getting on the ballot, and gives us something to learn and look for when we learn about candidates. So I believe that the league will be, I know we sent questions to a lot of the candidates in the primary, and I believe we'll have to send those to the Libertarian candidates as well to learn more about them. So that's Vote 411. And then on our website for the Greater Birmingham League, there's also a little site called Fingertips, and you go up to I think it's Learn More tab, and you click on Fingertips, and it's got listing of all the local offices and offices for this area, how you can reach them, a way that you can send them an email or send your voice, make your voice heard, and how to register to vote, and how to get a ballot, what the ballot says. So it's got a lot of information on it as well, just specific to our area. And that's on our website, which is lwvgb.org. And the league stays good and simple with the website. So it's lwvus.org, lwval.org, and lwvgb. So obviously the other way that we work to protect voting rights and give people more access is through advocating either for good legislation or against bad legislation. And there was some legislation last year, the state level, that was concerning that was passed. It was complicated legislation, as most of legislation is, but we felt that it would really damper the people's our ability and other organizations' ability to help people get to the polls and help people learn about voting and get access to voting. And I can't remember the bill number, but it was basically it was talking about elected people working in the actual election offices and in the voting polling places, not necessarily about volunteer groups, but the way it was worded, it definitely would cause people, because you don't want to be charged with a crime. Right. So, the more we criminalize stuff, the more people just don't want to participate. Some things should be criminalized, but not voting. So not helping people vote. So that's another way we stay involved in the legislative area. So now I'm going to talk about our civic engagement around issues. This is another thing I was just amazed with that I learned about from the league, is that we when they take position on issues, it's not lighthearted. It's not like, oh yeah, so-and-so said this is a good idea, let's put it on our agenda. You have to do a study and propose it. So you have to actually put the idea of the study before the board, and then go out and do your legwork. It doesn't have to be a peer-reviewed academic study, but it does have to be researched, and you have to show the league that you have done the research, and this is the position that you would like the league to take, and then it's a consensus-based decision to whether we take that position or not. And I haven't personally been through one of those yet, but I think it's a really valid way to make sure that the positions we take are science and database and are vetted with our members and our board members. So we have a list of issues in our program right now, and I won't go through all those in detail. I'll just give you the big headings are for the league. This is Greater Birmingham, and of course these fit into the state program positions, and they fit into the US ones. But government is one, and there's several kind of more specific under that. Transportation is one. Obviously, public transportation is a very important issue in Birmingham. Education is one area. Administration of justice is one area, and natural resources, which is how I got involved in the league. We have partnered with the league they've been great supporters of the Alabama Rivers Alliance and some of the work that we've done. And that's how I initially engaged and began getting more involved. And partnerships are very important to the league. We do get involved in a lot of coalition work and a lot of partnerships across the state. We do programs virtually and in person, not exactly monthly, maybe like every 6 weeks or so. And we try to feature partner organizations. We try to feature issues of interest. We've done them this past year on gun violence and on redistricting, of course, which is another issue we got very involved in that is way over my head to talk about, but it's something I'm learning about, and it's extremely important to our voting rights in Alabama. All of that's in court right now, so that's another topic for another day. But the league also works on, we have like member socials and in-person events too. So we hope that y'all will get involved. We'd love for you to go on our website and become a member and get on our email list at least so you can get our information. And I'll just close by saying that no matter what area of interest you have, Zonta's mission is very important. If your interest is protecting the rights and equal treatment of women, or your interest is environment or healthcare, criminal justice, gun violence, participating in democracy and actively exercising our participation in democracy, both through voting and through letting our voices be heard to our elected officials, is the only way that we're going to make change. And I know that money sometimes is hard to overcome in politics, and it feels like sometimes that our voices are not heard. But if we look at the past, we all know we sit here today because people have been overcoming that barrier for years and centuries. And when it truly matters, when we come together and we're active in government, we can make it what we want it to be. And so that's just what I preach all the time to everybody I know. And certainly that evidence is no more true than with groups like ours and the way that women have been given more rights over the years. And certainly the civil rights history we have right here in Alabama is evidence that people can come together and make a difference. And so thank you for having me here today, and I'll answer any questions if there's time, but I think I may have gone on too long. I don't know.
No, you're good. You're good.
I have a question. So I think it was probably 35 years ago I was involved with voters, and somehow it seemed like they either fell off the face of the earth or I did. But they had a lot of attention around and were kind of known for facilitating the debates. And I didn't like, what happened to that? And I don't know if anybody knows.
This is a little bit of Cindy's opinion, and,
Yeah.
and I don't know the history because I haven't been in it that long. Debates have also fallen off the face of the earth. The league is still trying to do candidate forums. We call them candidate forums now more. So Kathy, our state president, was trying to get a debate with the Secretary of State candidates, and one of them couldn't make it, and they've been sparring with her, or not her, but they've been sparring in the news about it. But oftentimes they don't respond, or they don't want to attend.
The party. It's a pain in the neck and everywhere else for writing candidates. If I go in and I write in Mickey Mouse, or I write in Allison Smith, or I write in my deceased friend, and then you're the election officials, you've got to tally all that up. And it has to be hand counted, and they hate it. And I think that they may have been behind that change. I don't see that's a problem. If Mary Lynn wants to run for something and she registers that she's going to be a writing candidate, I'll sure write her name in. So
I think a longer term solution is certainly to make it easier for independents to get on the ballot. I had a friend who tried to run years ago, and we had to try to get those 50,000 signatures or whatever. And he was somebody I thought he knew everybody in the whole state, and we still couldn't get him in time. So it's very difficult to get on the ballot.
Always to win, of course, it can just weaken the incumbent to get a strong opposition next time.
Yeah. We definitely need more competition in our elections.
Well, what we do now, somebody else pick up if you want to, because having you here, we're running short on time, but, and I know you have to go apply for a grant. But we wanted to let you know what we think we can do to help collaborate. And then whenever you think of things we need to do that might be more helpful on issues, we're working on the same thing, is Allison runs our website and social media, and we've got a link to the League of Women Voters website, don't we, Allison? And to Fingertips, I think.
Okay.
And we try to send out to members announcements about major programs that the league is doing, and we put you on our calendar. But anything beyond that that you would suggest, and when you send out action alerts, we usually look at we have an advocacy committee that determines what we're going to ask people to support, and we usually are supportive of the same things, and we'll send out alerts. We don't want to stretch our members too thin with too many issues, but we do try to follow up on that. And that was another one of my plugs for joining both organizations. Sometimes you can do one action and, fulfill your obligation to both. There's just one call to your citizen about.
It definitely takes a lot of people, so it's good to have both. Well, yeah, I'll look at that, and y'all please send us information so we can share yours as well. And maybe we talk about doing like some kind of joint program so that we can all get to know each other better.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.